but don't cover such a large territory. And that's the case for the ones in the plains and parts of the West. So these are all the different regions within our country, how they're broken down. And just to explain a little bit, so here at the Air Route Traffic Control Center, which is where our CWS office is, Center Weather Service Unit, there are some key people that we work with and support. Operations managers, they're responsible for everything that occurs on the floor. This includes oversight of areas. Go back a slide to here. You see our airspace here in the center. It's actually broken down into 7 distinct areas, and they're based off cardinal headings. So you just keep that in mind. When I talk about areas, that's what I'm actually referring to, these regions. And so each region has different air traffic controllers, and the operations managers in charge of them. They're also in charge of something called Traffic Management Unit, and I'll have more on that in a second here in a minute. But also, some big things they do is they coordinate national response requests. So if there's an emergency on an aircraft, or if there's some deconfliction at the national level that needs to happen related to safely seeing an aircraft to an airport, they will respond to that. They'll be involved coordinating that initiative. Sometimes they ask us for support on that as well, as far as weather, what conditions are like in a certain area. So that's an important thing to do. They're also, if there's an aircraft that's non-responsive in the airspace, they might help try to figure that out, like why isn't the aircraft responding on the channels to the air traffic controller. Another important place is the Traffic Management Unit. Within the Traffic Management Unit, there's a supervisory traffic controller, STMC, and so what they're responsible for is they coordinate with FAA Command Center and other centers for airspace deconfliction requests, as well as initiate and request national playbooks. So if there's a thunderstorm or an area of thunderstorms in our airspace or around our airspace, they will work with the command center to find a new path for the aircraft to follow. So they don't have to actually go through some thunderstorms that are in the original route. So they'll work deconfliction. They also will facilitate conference calls between the national level command center down to the local towers and something called Tracon, which we'll talk about in a minute. But local players, to get them on the phone to try to figure out what's the best course forward to move aircraft around if there's weather or some other limiting factor for conditions. And they are a primary customer there at the Traffic Management Unit. And so also within the Traffic Management Unit, there's another position called meter. So for Atlanta and Charlotte, that is the 1st and 5th busiest airport in the country. And for Atlanta and Charlotte, with aircraft coming into those airports, they need to be controlled. And so as they're controlled, the meter position, it's a position that 2 people fill, one for Atlanta and one for Charlotte. And you can think of the meter as a person, like when you drive up to a coin slot in the downtown area or wherever you're from, and you're trying to park, you park and you pay the meter. Well, you can think of this as a lot of that meter position is managing that only for a lot of different individuals, putting their money in the queue to assign them a spot, and that's based off of other conditions we'll talk about. But one of the things I want to mention for Tracon, so up front you see this, this is DTL, you can see Atlanta Center, or the Atlanta Tracon, that's that big Tracon area in the front center region. This is what we call a super Tracon. It handles a significant, higher volume of aircraft compared to other aerial Tracons. Other than the Atlanta Tracon, Charlotte is the next biggest and very important customer for us to provide weather support. So what defines a Tracon? Well, generally it's 30 to 50 mile radius across, and it's up to 10,000 feet. So aircraft will get handed off down to the Tracon as they as they descend from the wider airspace into the Tracon boundary, and then the Tracon will manage them to the airport, and then the airport takes over when the aircraft begins to land. So it's on approach and landing. That's when the tower at the specific airport will take over. You see over here on the right, these are pictures from within inside of a Tracon. The Atlanta Center Tracon looks like the bridge of the Enterprise. It's got a lot of terminals along the wall. There's an example here, a lot of people staffing those terminals, making sure that the aircraft are managed correctly in the airspace. And so how complex is the national airspace? I have an example here. We recently had a member of the CWSU travel from Atlanta to Dallas. It was a 2.5-hour flight. And the trivia question is how many traffic controllers you think it took to manage that flight from point to point. So for the distance that they traveled, here's the jet route they followed. It was jet route 4. They went from Atlanta to Dallas. And as they traveled, they took off and they moved into different sectors. So these little gray hash lines that are in here, these gray lines rather, those represent different sectors. So the aircraft was passed from sector to sector. They get a different air traffic controller. And the red boxes are the specific centers. So we have Atlanta Center, Memphis Center, and then Dallas Center area. And so this aircraft flew along that route. And one of the things to note is obviously if there's weather along those, you're going to go into different sectors. So that's going to increase the number of people that you're going to end up talking to, but air traffic controllers rather. So a minimum of 15 controllers it would take for that particular route of flight. Now, if there's bad weather, as I mentioned, that can increase the number of controllers up to 30 to 40 different controllers impacted by that one route. And the forecast plays a big role in how many, whether there's, like I mentioned earlier, national playbook out where you have an area that's closed off, the aircraft can't fly through that area because of a thunderstorm, then that's going to change their path. And so over on the right, you see these different sectors. I want to discuss a little bit about what a sector is. So for low sectors, you can think of that as that's mostly below flight level 240, so 24,000 feet. And below that, most of the time, that's going to be general aviation aircraft. So they can think of that as like your family Cessna, your smaller aircraft, or helicopters, or things like that. Most of the time, if they're flying at altitude at that level, they're going to be smaller aircraft. Now, they can climb and descend through there, but at altitude, flying at altitude. And then the high sectors, you're going to think of those as more your bigger aircraft like Delta, American Airlines, and stuff like that, flying from, let's say, Atlanta to Dallas, like we just showed. They might only fly at the high sector. That's between 24,000 and 30,000 feet. And then the ultra high sectors, a lot of times your big airlines will fly in those zones if they're flying across one of the oceans, going from Europe to the United States or somewhere. They can fly at higher altitudes. Also, your executive jets will fly at that level within the United States to get over some of the more thicker traffic at the lower altitudes. So it's very important. Weather plays a tremendous role in deciding how the aircraft travel, where they fly, and we're going to talk about the weather here more in the impacts in a minute. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about how complex it can be within the national airspace for getting aircraft to take off to land. And so, as I mentioned, Atlanta is the first busiest airport in the United States and also the world. In this case, this is from 2017. It's the busiest airport in the world, followed by Charlotte as fifth. Atlanta managed about 103 million passengers in 2017. This is behind Beijing, so another busy place. But when you see Atlanta can land 132 aircraft an hour, that's if nice weather. So basically high pressure, light winds, no clouds. We call that type of condition visual flight rules. They can land that capacity, and that's going to drop. We'll talk more about that in a minute with weather. Weather is the biggest impactor for dropping the rate, is what they call that. And they can land and that's an aircraft about every 25 seconds. On a operational day, we're looking at about 8,000 aircraft a day. Record's 11,000. It'll probably take a while for us to get back to that 11,000 mark because of COVID. Coronavirus has lowered the number lowered the volume pretty significantly. So that's something we could take a while to get back to that, but at any rate, that's about 1.6 million passengers a day. At this point, I'd like to ask, is y'all still with me?
Yes, sir.
Yep, we still got you.
Perfect. Thanks.
Bill Canario.
All right. So here are the aircraft. So for each airport, they have specific primary carriers. Delta Airline is the primary carrier for Atlanta. They manage a lot of the flights that occur in that airspace. Charlotte, we have American Airlines, and then also American Eagle. That's a subsidiary of American Airlines. They were bought by American Airlines just recently. So they are pretty much the main carrier at Charlotte. And for the airports and specifically, Atlanta is designed to handle more aircraft volume. They have an east to west orientation. Weather conditions, particularly thunderstorms, often result in a local or national ground stop based on longevity of weather factors such as wind or ceilings and visibility. This being the case, Charlotte, you can see over here on the right, is arguably, in my experience, harder to manage when it comes to weather. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but you can see the lines of departure and arrival at Atlanta, and then one shared runway for Atlanta that goes over an interstate, a local interstate, so you can drive under it. And then for Charlotte, they have shared runways. They're oriented north-south, as mentioned. And so down below, you can see typical rates. The rates are going to drop from 132 at Atlanta. That's their highest rate. Based off of aircraft landing per hour, based in the conditions, the weather conditions, the primary factor, which will lower the rate. And that could be ceilings or visibility or thunderstorms. Thunderstorms are going to be the biggest factor for either causing a national ground stop for the airport or a reduced rate of 80 if they're within the vicinity. And then Charlotte, north-south orientation, 87 is their max volume, down to 74 for ceiling conditions. So one example is we had our first severe event a few weeks ago. There was a strong line of thunderstorms moving toward the Atlanta airport in advance of a cold front. It turned out to be it turned out actually to be weakening as it moved toward the airport. They had some embedded thunderstorms within the line. We could predict pretty well when that impact would be at the airport for Atlanta. Well, one thing that happened that was a little more unpredictable for us was the Charlotte airport actually had ceilings that began to lower, and they continued to lower mid to late morning into the early afternoon, down to a condition where smaller aircraft were no longer able to land at the airport based off of visibility downrange on the ramp. So that condition where we had thunderstorms that were projected to hit Atlanta, which were most of our energy was put into forecasting and planning the actual movement of the front, it turned out to be Charlotte's condition that was a much more impactful event for the day for the airport. So you never really know where your trouble is going to lie when you have weather like that in the airspace. It could surprise you. Charlotte routinely causes surprises when you have events like that. So they ended up causing most of the delay across the airspace on that particular day. And so some of our key partners on that particular event in particular, just want to explain a bit about our key partners and how we all kind of interacted. The TMU, Traffic Management Unit, that I mentioned a minute ago, has a supervisory person. They're in charge of setting up the calls to discuss the conditions for the airspace of the day. And on that particular day, when we had thunderstorms, we got on the phone with the Aviation Weather Center, the FAA Command Center, and also the different Tracons. So we'll highlight that here. We had the Atlanta and Charlotte Tracon on the phone, along with the tower and the airlines. The airlines have a lot at stake when it comes to thunderstorms. If they have to divert an aircraft, just one aircraft could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you have to think about how many aircraft could be impacted. That's often millions of dollars based off of a forecast for those particular airlines. And then also the forecast offices. So as I mentioned, they're in charge of producing most of the public-faced weather forecasts. Greenville, Spartanburg, and Peachtree City, FFC there. That's our customer, that's our partner here to produce forecasts with us here at the weather unit. But these are the key people that we interact with on a daily basis, depending on weather. And in this case, with the thunderstorms, who we talk to in that case. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the TAF, so Terminal Aerodrome Forecast. This particular example, if you're familiar with the TAF, we have scattered at 15 and broken at 3,400 feet. So if you don't have any conditions, as I mentioned a minute ago for Atlanta, the typical rate is a 132 rate, 132 aircraft an hour. If you have the broken at 3,400 feet, that's going to drop your max rate down to 118 for the airport. And then if you add the scattered at 15 in there as well, it's going to drop a rate down to 110. So if the airport was not looking for those conditions and they had a planned max rate of 132, then that's going to mean you're going to have 22 planes potentially delayed and 4,400 passengers missing connections based off that one forecast. So it's very important for us to ensure that the quality of the TAF is intact. This is a conversation that we have with the forecast office, and we do this in a chat system. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So also, if you can plan out the event and you can make sure that the TAF is reflective of the actual condition, then you can slow the volume down a little bit for the airports to manage better and prevent some of the delay. So it's good even if you catch something and you realize that you're behind, showing the real condition soonest can allow them to adjust and make corrections. This is an example of some of the departure routes for Atlanta and Charlotte. Aircraft exit the ramp, they take off and head on headings north, south, east, and west from the airports. Don't get confused with the ramp direction. This is the departure areas. And aircraft arrive at the corners. So they come into the airports at the corners for both airports here. And one of the busiest areas is that northeast quadrant and to the west of northeast of Atlanta, west of Charlotte. You get traffic can get very backed up in that particular area. So it's good to manage the volume. And if there's weather, thunderstorms on any given day, that could be a problematic area. And most of that's terrain driven too, with the mountains being in that location. So decision support services, just to talk a little bit about this, you can see the top right picture there. That lightning struck the Delta airline when one of our meteorologists local was on shift. Does anybody want to wage a bet on what happened with that aircraft? Do you think it ended up deboarding the plane or anything like that? Well, what actually happened is that the lightning struck the aircraft, it discharged through the firewall, the brake system, and it got about a 30-minute look over and then it took off. So these aircraft are designed to handle that type of a lightning strike, believe it or not. And while it is very important for us to inform the airport when they're going to have those conditions, the aircraft might not be as severely impacted as the bottom image there. That particular image is a plane that flew through some hell in a thunderstorm, caused significant damage. In-flight emergency, obviously, with that particular case. So flying through thunderstorms can be very problematic, particularly when there's hail involved. So hazards include that we focus and put extra emphasis on are icing, turbulence, hail, and lightning. One of the products that we use at the Center Weather Unit, this is a means for us to collaborate. This is a product that we produce in collaboration with the Aviation Weather Center and the national meteorologists in charge, National Aviation Meteorologist, and all of the Center Weather Service units. We get in here and we produce thunderstorm forecasts for the day. 8 times a day, we update this forecast. It's a forecast that's set in the future on 2-hour increments. And it basically will show the areas where we're expecting thunderstorms to occur. So as I mentioned, it's called a terminal convective forecast, TCF. At some point, the traffic supervisor, traffic manager, this is a great tool for them to be aware of what weather is going to, have negative impacts on the airspace, and so they can plan their routing. It's really made for the customer, our partners, to get an idea of how they might need to plan their route structure and whether or not they'll need a national playbook. So I'm going to play this loop of thunderstorms. This is going to give you an example of what thunderstorms can do in the airspace and how they can negatively impact us. You can see the thunderstorms building. This is a summertime pattern, so it's diurnally driven. And you got all the aircraft vector and move around the volume. You can see some of them scattering. That's diverts. So they're having to go to another airport because of airports on the field, eventually finding a way in as the thunderstorms move off. That ring around the airport is the Tracon boundary. You can see just the volume continuing to flow in. And but an event like this can cause millions of dollars of delay and be very detrimental and dangerous. You can see how dangerous it could be for the actual aircraft in that type of environment. Fortunately, the experts who manage it are very good at what they do. So that's a neat loop to show you that type of condition. Is everybody still with me?
Yep. All good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great. All right. So this forecast shows thunderstorm conditions for the different sectors. This is a very important product. It's really what it's about is it's about taking the meteorological condition and putting it into practical usable in a practical usable form so that the controllers and those who have a need to know can make a decision based off of condition. So this is a planning tool. It's set in advance of the time period. This is for thunderstorms, and you can see the different sectors, the north, south, east, and west departures. In the corners, those are your arrivals. And you can see colored in yellow, there's a chance of thunderstorms. Red indicates that they're likely to have thunderstorms. And that's Atlanta and Charlotte. And you can see the conditions that cause that particular pattern to occur. You have some shower and thunderstorm activity in and around the airport. And this is basically taking the radar image and making it into a usable form, which is what we try to do in the Center Weather Service Unit, is to put things in a form, in a way that the air traffic controllers can understand and make good decisions based off of that. So Center Weather responsibilities, I want to play a short video. This is a product of, we issued this 3 times a day as a pre-duty weather briefing. It's very important to give operational awareness to our customers. And I'm going to play this real quick for you so you can kind of see what it is we do. This is your last pre-duty weather briefing on 11/46, the 4th of November. There's no time for there's a combination of most of the airspace coming in this is on So we issue that 3 times a day, as mentioned, at 5:45, 12:30, and around 8:30 p.m. It's an important product, particularly for those who can't get our forecast in person or on the phone. This is a good way for us to reach a larger outline locations. Other products that we create, this is our website page. We have a graphical product that we update with some text. So this is basically giving there's thunderstorms, there's sealing issues, and then turbulence and icing. We put that information in here. And you can see the gate products we talked about a little while ago in here as well, down below with the color-coded charts. And I'll have a little more on that bottom right product there. But TAFs are in here as well. And we also put in, other than the TAFs for Atlanta and Charlotte, we include little remarks. So if there's conditions that fall outside of what would be typically included in a TAF, we'll make sure that that's explained. We put, generally, this is the different regions at which thunderstorms could be possibly impacting the location. And if there's like frost or some condition for morning hours, or winter weather in general, we'll often put in there. Area briefings, as I mentioned a while ago, ZTL is broken off into 7 distinct areas. Those are broken within different cardinal directions. And this product, we brief the different areas supervisors twice a day, and we create tailored weather briefings for them. We explain what the condition is going to be and anything that might be unique to the particular area. Weather in north of ZTL on the mountains in North Carolina and Tennessee might be drastically different than what they're experiencing in South Georgia. So it's important for us to give them a tailored briefing. We also do brief everybody in an area-wide and building-wide stand-up for the conditions twice a day. So PIREPs, that's pilot report information. That's extremely important for ensuring that what weather warnings are issued on are accurate, and we take information from what pilots are reporting, whether it's icing or turbulence or whatever the weather condition, low-level wind shear, and we'll provide the different areas a snapshot of that condition that's ongoing with this PIREP page. You can see the 7 areas broken off, and in this case, area 2 has moderate turbulence in that particular point. And so it showcases the picture of the condition. And this particular product is posted on a huge screen in the facility. So when if traffic controllers are walking back to the area, they can get a snapshot on what conditions are actively ongoing. And one of the big roles at the Center Weather Service Unit is to issue Center Weather Service Advisories. This is for stuff that is not covered with the aviation weather warning. So the Aviation Weather Center will issue products. If the Aviation Weather Center doesn't cover it, then we'll issue for them. So we're looking here. This is an example of a thunderstorm Center Weather Service Advisory and a low IFR or IFR instrument flight rule advisory. So these are 2 conditions, and you can see the example down below here. It shows the points that make the box for the from region. In this particular case, we had patchy low IFR ceilings below 500 feet, visibilities below half statute mile with fog and rain and thunderstorms. So this is a 2-hour product. We will issue every 2 hours, and the thunderstorm product is every hour. And we'll also issue for icing and turbulence, mountain wave and lower level wind shear, and freezing precipitation, low IFR conditions, and thunderstorms. So as I mentioned, Atlanta Center is a very busy airspace. A lot of volume flows through our airport. And also we have special events. The Masters just concluded. That was a big event for us here at the center. And for that, NASCAR, this center is actually in Hampton, Georgia, and we have a major speed, Atlanta Motor Speedway, right across the street. And you might think, all the rich athletes and players are either riding in with the people with their vehicles or what have you, but actually most of them fly into the airports. The Masters, a lot of them fly into Augusta. There are times where the volume going into Augusta exceeds that of Atlanta Airport. And a lot of that is just to do with the players and the individuals coming in to watch the particular event. So it's a logistical challenge for the air traffic controllers at the beginning of the events, as everybody leaves at once. And we just have to manage that as we go along. And so we'll see, we at the CWSU will brief special event weather conditions for those airports when they arise. All right, is everybody still with me?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, let's see here. Let me get back to the, all right. So I believe you can see me now, is that correct, Colin?
Yep, we got your video now.
All right. I have the questions that were given to me, so I'd like to try to answer some of those if I can for you. Real quick, all right. So what's a typical day like? Well, the first thing that we do typically is we'll come in and we'll produce the weather briefing product that I showed y'all, that example. Then we'll update our text products. We'll brief the traffic management unit, which is the primary customer. Later in the morning, we'll brief the areas and we'll do a stand-up for the entire facility to include the operations manager. And the special skills and classes, I would focus, if you're in class and you're interested in doing aviation weather, I would focus on the radar, any radar course you might be able to have. That's looking at radar and being able to interpret the radar condition, the conditions based off radar is very important. Whether that is outflow boundaries, produced by thunderstorms or just regular wind shifts. I mean, you've got the impact at the tower, and the management of that condition is very important for safety of the aircraft. So synoptic meteorology is another important one if y'all have a synoptic meteorology course. What other agencies do you work with on a regular basis? The command center, the FAA command center is a very important customer, and we'll coordinate with them along with some of the Aviation Weather Center and the National Meteorologist, Aviation Meteorologist, also the Forecast Office and the airlines. So there's a lot of different players that are involved with us we work with on a daily basis. Let's see. High stress day. Well, most of the high stress days are related to when there's everything kind of comes down to thunderstorms. It's not always the case, but low ceilings can also pose a high stress day. If a lot of times what will happen is we're more confident and able to forecast low IFR condition, but when you start getting into whether or not you're going to have a half statute mile visibility or a quarter mile statute visibility down on the ramp, that can get pretty challenging and beyond our meteorological ability. It just depends on how we see the broader scope of conditions deteriorating or improving, and that's where we can kind of add some product enhancement. Other than thunderstorms, low IFR and ceilings are the worst condition, most stressful. We do use AWIPS. AWIPS is primarily used at the forecast office. There are a lot of uses of that service that we don't really avail ourselves to at the Center Weather Service Unit. But as I mentioned, we'll use it for radar. We'll use it for some of the model data, particularly looking at ceiling conditions and winds and simulated reflectivity. But we can also get simulated reflectivity from other model sources that are more available. INSEP's products with their model guidance page. Public outreach, this is an example of public outreach. We do some of that, and a lot of times that's facilitated through our local weather forecast office who we're tied with. And we do speak with other Center Weather Service units. And actually one example of that is when there's a staff shortage. We'll work with our neighboring Center Weather Service unit in Memphis to do a handover, and then they will take over operations for our area. They'll produce our products and inform our customers of the condition that could be expected. That's pretty seldom we have to do that, but we do speak with the Center Weather Service units on a reoccurring basis. So a few years ago, the NTSB released a document highlighting the use of Center Weather Service units during emergencies. Have you ever been asked to assist with a specific aircraft? As mentioned, the operations manager is in charge of coordinating national response to aviation issues. If there is an in-flight emergency, whether for someone being sick on an aircraft or some mechanical issue with the aircraft, a lot of times the operations manager will come back and ask, what is the condition like at a specific airport closest to where that aircraft is? If there is a missing aircraft or confirmed downed aircraft, then we will produce a weather product package for them. This will include the current advisories that are out, warnings that are out. Other products would include a roll-up of the METAR conditions for the period and location, and other PIREPs that may have been out. So we'll do that frequently, and we'll also do that for other reasons. That's an important customer-oriented thing we do. So I hope this answers y'all's questions. Certainly, if you have more questions, I'm available to answer. A lot of stuff to try to cover with y'all in a short period of time. I think I probably did it better my first attempt, but I had nobody listening to me, so it was all by myself. So I'm very grateful that y'all were willing to come back and listen a second time. So
Yeah, so we have a question from Mr. Split, our aviation weather professor. He's teaching a class right now, so he couldn't be at this second go, but I'm gonna go ahead and send his questions in the chat.
okay.
I want to make sure the acronyms are correct and whatnot.
Sure. Oh, scroll down. Okay. It seems that most icing advisories over the U.S. are Snow Weather Service advisories as opposed to SIGMETs. Is this your impression? And if so, why might this be the case? What extent is do you use, create, modify the playbooks for swaps? Okay, and okay. All right, so Center Weather Service advisories, I would say something about the Center Weather Service advisory, and it's not really just related to icing, it's actually related to turbulence. I had to issue a turbulence CWA before I came in here. And what we do at the Center Weather Service Unit, we usually just don't issue those. We collaborate. We collaborate with the Aviation Weather Center through a means of a chat. We have a chat where all of the key players are in this forum, and we can talk to them about what we're thinking. So a lot of times when it comes to icing or turbulence, we will put something out for a condition that might be localized or of a specific area within the airspace that is not at a national, that is not going to cause an impact across different areas, or, different geographical areas. So, and it might be short-lived. Duration is also a key thing that we look at. If it's something that is a temporary condition that's being reported through PIREPs, then likely in the cases, then I would issue, or a meteorologist at the CWSU will issue a CWA before it becomes a national SIGMET. Not everything rises to the level of SIGMET, significant meteorological product there. A lot of things could be handled with the CWA, and that's why you see more of them. It's just because of the conditions being present but not present in duration, or not present in space, is that you might need for a SIGMET. I hope that answers that question. More stressful day. So we just talked a little bit about that. It just really depends. Obviously, high pressure days are pretty low key, not a lot to worry about. But when you have I think when you have a major thunderstorm event, These can be summertime driven diurnal thunderstorms. They're a lot harder to predict. You have to look at outflow boundaries and stuff like that. Also, severe season time when you have a front moving through with those quasi-linear lines with the storms kind of just branching off all over the place. That's pretty problematic and can cause us some issues. One example of that was we actually had a tornado warning for the facility. And when you have a tornado warning at the facility, that causes certain procedures to be put into place. And you got people who would normally be routing and making sure people are safe in the air going into a shelter. So those are stressful occasions. You just got to take it as they come. So, and the create modified playbooks, those playbooks are put into place by the FAA in concert with the traffic management unit. The weather will give input at the national and CWSU level to dictate which playbook they go on, but I don't, deviations from the playbook are probably made between controllers, but I think that those are only if the thunderstorms warrant. Generally, they try to stick to playbooks if they can. So, I hope that answers your question, Colin.
Yeah, then I'm gonna encourage the students in Mr. Split's class. Since he's not here, I'm gonna also harass you guys to ask him questions. So I know that's what he would do. So anyone from Mr. Split's class have a question here? It's a great time for pilots to get to talk to meteorologists to get to talk to pilots.
So is this class is that aviation class?
It's technically as it's coded in a few different, I guess, different segments of the student population will feed into it.
Okay.
So I know we've got a decent amount of pilots. We have a lot of aviation management, and the exact scope of that, those majors have to tell me, because I'm honestly not quite sure where the lines are drawn on that. Then I know there's some ATC folks, and then you have the weather folks here as well that all can or are required to take the course.
Well, I can tell you from my, I used to, before I forecasted for the FAA here, or the National Weather Service for the FAA, I forecasted for the military, and often talk with navigators who are actually on the aircraft and the pilots about things that concern them the most. And obviously, anything that's going to break them off of their pattern, the thunderstorms, and the navigator's got to know, he's got to be a very good amateur meteorologist to understand what kind of conditions are going to potentially cause him to divert or not be able to complete whatever his mission is, whether that's, a military driven thing or getting people from A to B. So FAA, pilots with these major airlines, they have software and products that they use to help them navigate around weather, but there's still the emphasis of having that in the military, these navigator positions. And I know that if you're interested in that type of thing as an aviation geared person, working on an aircraft in that capacity, pay close attention to your convective if you have a severe weather class, or obviously synoptic. I mentioned synoptic meteorology, but that's a very important area of meteorology to understand in aviation. Bigger picture weather patterns and how that weather is going to impact you.
I'll float another question. Okay. How is the use of climatology when you guys are doing your forecasts?
Well, that's actually a wonderful question. Climatology is, the better you understand the climatology of an area, I think it's going to make your forecast that much better. And what I mean by that is we have a very challenging environment with Charlotte. They're to the east of the Appalachians. They're kind of on an area where they can get weather influences from both a mountainous and coastal terrain. So understanding which ways the winds typically flow in a given year, the wind pattern, when might you see an increase of fog potential at the airport based off of a condition, a climatological condition. These are all very important things to know, and it'll help at least provide a base for you to start from when you're coming in on a morning and not sure quite what the weather's going to do. Because there are times where you could be on the bubble between just having lower ceilings that will delay the rate or lower the rate to being a ground stop scenario where you have, an 1/8 of a mile visibility on the ramp. So climatology is very important for that purpose, I would think, for ceilings and visibility primarily, for me anyway, and winds.
Yeah, so for some context, especially on that question, is in that aviation meteorology class, is really the second semester of it, is we're working on a airport climatology project.
Okay.
So we were all assigned an airport essentially to do our analysis on. And your answer really drove home to the point of that project, because we're doing things like, frequency of occurrence of heavy fog, or less than a half mile, or pick your high impact variable. So it's nice to know that our school projects do kind of line up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great assignment. I mean, for me, for Atlanta and Charlotte, when it comes to climatology, winds are important, but reduced visibility is going to cause me a daily problem. Noting the difference, but as I mentioned, and I would, with that project, I would look at the more micro scale stuff on when, if you can get it, when do they have visibility of less than 1/8 of a mile or 1/4 of a mile compared to just 2 statute miles, because that's the type of stuff that's going to mean the difference between a 110 rate in Atlanta and in a national, maybe some aircrafts can't get into the airport and you have, like an 80 rate or something, maybe even a national ground stop for the airport. So those small scale differences in the ceilings and visibility on the airports, at the airports, are important. And I can imagine in Florida, sorry about that, in Florida, thunderstorms, you get the dual sea breeze stuff going on, and those airports, Miami, Jacksonville, Tampa, those regions are I would look at thunderstorms for those areas.
Yeah, fortunately for us, for anyone doing any Florida forecasting, the Tampa office did a really nice climatology with the sea breezes, and essentially looking at the mean wind from 1,000 to 700. And they put a climatology. Okay. It's kind of nice. I definitely, if I have to forecast for convection, that's generally where I'll start. Is that it's very nice. They break it down to hourly, and it's really good if anyone is curious.
Yeah, and things that, with thunderstorms and the movement of fronts, the southeast typically, historically, has a highest preponderance of nocturnal tornadoes. And that has to do with, that could be tracked to climatology too, when you're looking at how fronts move from off the plains, they form off the plains that generate earlier in the day, and then track across through the southeast late in the period, with the higher number of tornadic events being a night occurrence for the southeast. So you can actually get some good climatological information based off movement of front, depending on where the airport is. That can inform a little bit too.
So this is Steve Lazarus. Hey, how you doing, Chris?
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. I'm not a synoptician. I teach dynamics instead. But so which airports are notoriously difficult to forecast for or problematic? I mean, I know Denver, I mean, there's some areas that are prone to certainly downbursts, right? I know that's certainly a hazard, but are there airports that are particularly difficult?
That is a great question. To be honest with you, I've been here at this Atlanta Center Weather Service Unit for a year. I've been in my bubble trying to understand the dynamics and conditions here at these two airports. It'll take me probably another 5 years to fully speed myself up to a point to tell you just about those two airports. I can tell you though that my experience so far is that Charlotte is a far harder airport to get, and it's not just based off the weather condition. It's about the orientation of the runways, how the structure is of the actual airport itself, and where they're located. Obviously, is very important. I mentioned that earlier. Charlotte, they get the conditions that are driven from the mountainous regime and then also coastal regime, depending, and that can be pretty problematic for thunderstorms and ceilings for us. So to answer your question, though, I don't really know too much about how the other airports are as far as difficulty.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else have a question? There's like what there was 35 of you. Now there's 32 of you. Surely you guys have some other questions. All right, I'll float one, guys. So how do you get to your position you have now?
Well, if you're interested in working at a center weather service unit, obviously y'all are in a great place with this aviation meteorology dynamic you have going on. These two things are interwoven in your classes. That's great to have both of those flavors in there. For me, I'll tell you my path. I worked as a meteorologist for the Georgia Air National Guard. That's kind of a lower branch of the Air Force. I did that for a few years and kind of got familiar with briefing pilots, navigators, air crew, more tailored weather forecast conditions for route of flight. The military is a great way to get familiar with aviation in a more hands-on kind of way. If you're interested in doing meteorology or working in aviation in general, that was a great starting point for me. When I saw this job open about a year ago, I'm actually, for about the last 7 years of my career before I joined the National Weather Service, I was a cyberspace operations officer, which has absolutely nothing to do with meteorology. But when I saw this job open here at the Center Weather Service Unit, I knew that the combination background of aviation, working for briefing pilots, air crew, the conditions would be a great mix with the weather experience. So if you could find ways to volunteer or do things, get familiar with your local aviation affiliates. If there's clubs you can join or something, that could also be a good way to kind of get your name out there. You'll see jobs open from time to time. You can, post-COVID world, you could also tour a CWSU, meet the meteorologists in charge, kind of see what they do and carry on a conversation with them about opportunities and stuff. But it's a competitive place to be, like most National Weather Service jobs. But if your interest is there, then you can definitely accomplish that goal.
Uh-oh. Colin did ask a question for you. Are you on silence? Yes. Are they asking questions?
Hey, Colin.
Yeah.
In a couple minutes, I actually have to get back to do. I'm actually took a break to come do the briefing. I'm actually have to get back and do my afternoon products here shortly. But I greatly appreciate this opportunity to brief y'all. I hope it was informative for you. If you want another brief at any point, you just let Sid know, and at any later on, maybe next semester or whenever, we're always grateful and willing to help. Provide some perspective on what the Center Weather Service Unit does.
Yeah, that'd be great. It'd also be nice to talk at some point. You come talk to us about your weather and air guard, because I know I've heard I've heard about active duty, but I can't say I know much about how guard does things.
I'd be more than happy to give you all a talk on that. Of course, I'd have to go a different route. I'd get in trouble if I did that here. But the Air National Guard is a wonderful, wonderful thing. I'd encourage everybody to look at it.
Yeah, and it's I think Sid's he actually gonna come speak to us about AMS. Our next meeting.
Did you already have that meeting with Sid, or is that coming up?
Yeah, that's coming up. That to be our final meeting of the semester.
Okay, cool. He's also a my undergrad was South Alabama. So if you don't understand him or if he sounds messed up, that's because he's from there.
Well, I don't know if those Florida folks are doing much better. So
Chris, I wanted to thank you on behalf of Florida Tech, basically, for doing this tonight. Really, really do appreciate it, especially after the first time. We were all so disappointed. So, thank you very much. It was greatly appreciated.
Yes,
Chris,
sir. No problem.
I'm the aviation meteorology professor, but I'm lecturing remotely in Panama. So I'll see the recording for you. But thank you very much for doing this.
Yes, sir. No problem. Yeah, I had good practice my first time. I thought I was talking to a large crowd. It turned out I got the end of it. I'm like, whoa, nobody's here,
right? Worse things have happened, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. I'll talk to everybody later.
bye. Thanks.
Bye.